In general, we can have the major data types that we can have in the Pythons are numbers, a string, list, tuple, dictionary, and boolean. So in this section, we are going to talk about the numbers, and later I'm going to cover all these data types, and I'm going to talk about the difference between these data types and how you can work with these data types in your programming. So let's jump into the numbers. So in the numbers, we can have two general types of the numbers in Python. First is the integer number. So basically there are integer numbers, and they are, for example, 1, 247, 10, 12. All these are the integer numbers, and they are placing in the group of integer or int group in the numbers. Or we can have a real numbers or real values, for example 1.3, 23.46. All these real numbers are in the float group. So we can have two numbers can be divided in two general groups, integer group and float group. So what we can do with the numbers in the Python, we can assign a variable to that. We can assign these numbers to a variable. For example, let's imagine that we are going to calculate the velocity, and what we need to calculate the velocity, we need distance and the time. So if we divide distance over time, we can calculate the velocity. So to calculate the velocity, first we need to define a variable, distance, and assign some number or value for that variable. And later we should define another variable, time, and assign time for that. So let's jump into Jupyter and define a variable distance. If we want to assign some number to this variable, we should use equal sign. So distance is equal to 100. So we assign 100 meter to distance. If we run this, we can ask Python what is the data type for distance. How we can ask, if you type, and inside parentheses, if you write the name of that variable, Python will say that what is the type of this variable. For example, in this case, Python is saying that type of distance is integer. So let's define another variable, which is time, and say time is 20.65 seconds. Okay, and we want to know what is the type of time. So if you write type and then inside the parentheses, if you write the variable, Python will say that this is a float type because this is a real number and this is an integer number. Now we want to calculate velocity. We know that velocity is equal to distance divided by time. So if you run this code, Python is already calculated the velocity, but you want to see what is the velocity. So if you are in the Jupyter environment, if you write velocity, you can get the value for the velocity. So it is 4.84. Okay, or you can use some predefined functions in the Python. For example, one of those is print function. So if you write print and inside parentheses, if you write the name of that variable, Python is going to print that variable, the value of that variable, which here is the velocity for you. Or you can add some explanation for that. For example, you can say that print. If you want to add some note or explanation for that velocity, you need to write that inside the quotation. So inside the quotation means that whatever you are writing here, Python is going to show that exactly in the output. For example, you can say that the velocity value is, okay, and you want to have this in the output, and after this is you want to write the velocity number. So you can write velocity. So if you write velocity here, and if you run that, in the output you are going to have the velocity value is this value, okay. And the other things that you may want to make it a little bit better, to looks better, because right now you have 4.84 something. It's a long number, and you want to make it to looks a little bit better, so you can use round function. Round function is going to take two values. First value is the name of the variable that you are going to round that, for example velocity, and the second one is the number of decimals that you want to keep. For example, you want to say I'm going to keep 2 decimals after this point. So in this case you are going to keep 4.84. so you can make it you can make the velocity to looks a little bit better. But right now, because we run the velocity, but if you write velocity you are going to get the same number. So in this case, when you run this velocity, you need to assign the velocity again to this. So in this case, if you run the velocity again, you will get 4.84. So we run the velocity to 2 decimal points. So basically what I want you to learn from this section is that we can assign the numbers to the variables. We can check the variables type, which is, if it is number, we have two types of number, integer or float. And also we can do the calculation, mathematical calculation with those variables, and we can print the final results. Now let's have another example. Let's make this to look a little better, cleaner. So we are going to calculate the volume of this cylinder, and so the volume of the cylinder is p r square h. Okay, so we need to define two variables, h and r, and we want to ask Python to calculate volume. Okay, so first we need to have r, which is a radius. So let's say it's, for example, 10 centimeter, and we have h. We have h, which is, let's say, 100 centimeter right now. So we define r and h, and we assign some variables to those some values to these variables. And because we assign the integer number, so type of r and h should be integer. So let's check it. So type r is integer, and type h is integer. Oops, we should run this one. Okay, type h is integer as well. Right now we want to have another variable, which its name is volume, and we want to calculate the volume based on this. So it will be 3.14 for p times r square. So it means that r, so let's use parentheses, r to power 2 multiplied by h. So if we run this, we can have a volume. So we can check the volume values is this, and we can use a print function and say the volume is volume. So we have a volume here. So this is the output. Now imagine that we are going to get R and H values from a user, and we are going to give him or her the volume. Okay, so let's change this a little bit. So for R, we don't want to assign R like this. We want to get R from the user. So for that, we can use input function. Okay, so input function is a getting values from the user. Okay, so if you write input, for example, inside input, inside this quotation, you need to help the user that knows what you want. For example, you can say that input, please input R value. Okay, so and you need to assign this value to a number, to a variable, and the variable name is R. So if you write this, okay, input Python user can assign the value for the R, for example, 100. But if I okay, so right now we have 100, but the point is, if you want to calculate, for example, volume using this R value, you are going to get error. Okay, and error says that the R value that you get from the user is a string. It's not integer. Okay, so let's check that. So type R, if we check the type R, is a string. So it's not a number, it's not integer, or it's not float. So you need to change this to integer. If you are using input keyword and you are getting some values from the user, all these values that user is entering, for example, right now we entered 100, all those are in the string format. So you need to change this string format to integer format or float format. For that, you can use this. So you are getting in this R from the user, and you can say that int stands for integer. I want the integer to convert. I want to convert whatever value you are getting from the user to integer. Okay, so you are getting these values from the user, so and you want to convert that to the integer. So right now, if I put 100, and if I want to calculate the volume, you are not getting any error, and the type of R will be integer. Okay, so we get R from the user, and let's say H, we are going to get H from the user as well. So it should be input. We use input function, and we are saying that please enter H value. And again, if a user enter any value here, this will be a string, so we need to convert that to the integer or float. So let's say we are going to convert this time to float. Okay, so we need to write float here. And if we run this, we are going to see this box, and this box asking user that what is the H value. So let's say H value is 100.56. So right now Python is saving 156 in H variable, and we can check the type of H, which is float, because we use float here. And now we can calculate volume, which will be 3.14 times 2r power 2 times h. And this is a volume that we already calculated. So here in general, we learned that we can assign these numbers. We can have two types of numbers, integer number and float number. Integer number are integer values and float number are real values. And we can assign these numbers to different variables, and we can do the different mathematical calculations to the variable, and we can calculate the different formula using these variables. And also we can print the results, or we can get the variables from the user using input key import function. But we know that the result of input function always will be a string, so we need to convert that either to integer or float. So you can use this format to convert that to integer or float, and then we can do the different calculations, different mathematical calculation, and calculate different formula using these variables.